Dae-hyun Cho stood frozen in the doorway of a small café on a quiet street in Cheongdam-dong, and for the first time in 5 years, the most feared man in Busan could not make his legs move. The wedding ring sat in a black velvet box inside his coat pocket. He had picked it up 20 minutes earlier from a jeweler 3 doors down, a ring meant for a woman he did not love, for a wedding he did not want, for a life he had agreed to only because his dying mother had begged him to stop being alone. He had walked into this cafe because his driver wanted coffee. That was the only reason. A small, meaningless decision that was about to break his life wide open. Behind the counter stood a woman piping caramel drizzle over a tray of pastries, her natural curls pulled back, flour dusted across her wrist. She had not looked up yet. She did not know he was standing there. But Dae-hyun knew her instantly, the way a man knows his own heartbeat even when he has spent years trying to silence it. Simone Carter, his wife, the woman who vanished 5 years ago, without a word, without a note, without a single trace an army of investigators could ever find. And then a small voice called out from the back room, feet moving fast across the tile floor. "Mom, can I have the last one? I already ate my breakfast, I promise." A boy ran into view, 5 years old. Warm brown skin, his mother's wide eyes, and behind his left ear, barely visible beneath his hair, a birthmark shaped like a curved blade. Dae-hyun had seen that exact mark on his own father, on his grandfather, on himself. The boy stopped running the second he saw the stranger in the doorway. And Dae-hyun felt the velvet box in his pocket suddenly weigh more than anything he had ever carried in his life. Before we go further into what happened next, if stories like this keep you glued to the screen, hit that subscribe button and tap the like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel grow, and I promise you, what happens in the next few minutes will leave you speechless. Now, let's get back into it. 5 years earlier, nobody in Busan believed the marriage would last 6 months, let alone happen at all. Dae-hyun had built the Cho family shipping empire into something that moved far more than freight through the port of Busan. Contracts, warehouses, connections that stretched into Tokyo and Shanghai, all of it required a man who never let feeling cloud judgment. That was the rule his father drilled into him before he died. Emotion makes you predictable. Predictable men get buried. Then, Simone Carter arrived from Baltimore, sent by an American logistics firm to audit Cho Shipping's Pacific contracts, and she broke every rule he had built his life around. She was not afraid of him. She sat across from him in a boardroom full of men who trembled at his silence, and she pointed out discrepancies in his own ledgers without blinking. Nobody had spoken to him like that in over a decade. He found himself listening. Then he found himself waiting for her calls. Then he found himself unable to imagine his life without her voice in it. They married quietly in Haeundae, away from cameras, away from his mother's disapproval, and away from the one person who would never forgive him for it. His cousin, Dae-hyun Cho. Jae-sung had run the daily operations of the family business since Dae-hyun's father passed away. He had given the company 15 years of loyalty, discipline, and silence, expecting that loyalty to eventually be rewarded with real power. Instead, the board chose Dae-hyun, the younger cousin, the direct bloodline. Jae-sung swallowed that insult and said nothing, but when Dae-hyun brought home an American wife, a black woman from Baltimore, Jae-sung finally said what he had been holding back for years. He told Dae-hyun, to his face, that her presence would embarrass the family in front of their partners overseas. That she made the Cho name look weak. Dae-hyun warned him never to speak that way again. Jae-sung never said it again. He simply waited. 6 months into the marriage, Simone discovered she was pregnant. She never had the chance to tell her husband because Jae-sung reached her first. He did not threaten her directly. He was far too careful for that. He simply showed her photographs, printed and placed neatly on her kitchen table, photographs of her younger brother Marcus walking to class at a community college in Baltimore, completely unaware that someone on the other side of the world had been watching him for weeks. Jae-sung told her, calmly, that accidents happen to people far from home, even in America. Then he told her something even more devastating, a lie crafted precisely to break what the threat alone might not. He told her that Dae-hyun already had a second marriage quietly arranged for business reasons, and that she was simply a complication waiting to be handled. Simone left that same night. No note, no goodbye. She flew back to Baltimore, changed her number, and disappeared into a country large enough to swallow anyone who wanted to stay hidden. She told herself she was protecting her unborn child from a family that saw him as a liability before he even had a name. Dae-hyun searched for 2 years. He spent more money chasing her than most companies spend running an entire division, and the whole time, Jae-sung sat beside him in every meeting, nodding with false sympathy, quietly steering every lead toward a dead end, watching his cousin fall apart over a woman he himself had erased. Right now, if you're feeling that knot in your chest, that's exactly the reaction I want you to sit with for a second. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and if this story is hitting you the way I think it is, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss where this goes. 5 years passed. Dae-hyun's mother grew sicker, and in her final wish for her son to be settled, she pushed him toward Yoonji Baek, the daughter of a wealthy shipping magnate out of Incheon. Dae-hyun agreed, the way a man agrees to a life sentence. Numb, empty, convinced joy was something that had already been used up in his one chance and taken from him. Now standing in a cafe doorway, with a wedding ring meant for a woman he did not love, Dae-hyun looked at the boy in front of him and understood, with terrifying clarity, exactly what he had lost. "Mom," the boy said slowly, backing toward the counter, "who is that?" Simone finally looked up, and when her eyes met Dae-hyun's, 5 years of silence collapsed in a single breath. "Malachi," she said, her voice steady, despite everything crashing inside her. "Go grab your backpack from the back, baby. I need to talk to this customer." The boy hesitated, glancing between his mother and the stranger with the birthmark he'd never noticed matched his own. Then he walked away, slow and unsure. Dae-hyun stepped further into the cafe, his voice barely above a whisper. "How old is he?" Simone set down the piping bag. She did not flinch. "You already know the answer to that. You're just afraid to say it out loud." Outside, his driver waited by the car with the second half of the wedding ring paperwork still needing a signature. Inside, a 5-year-old boy carrying the Cho family bloodline was reaching for his backpack, completely unaware his entire world was about to change. And somewhere across the city, Jae-sung Cho was about to receive a phone call telling him exactly where his cousin was standing, right now, and with whom. If you want to know what happens when Dae-hyun finally learns the truth his cousin has been hiding for 5 years, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on, because you do not want to miss part 2 of this story. And before you go, I'd love to know, if you were in Simone's position, would you have stayed silent to protect your child, or would you have gone back? Let me know in the comments below. Dae-hyun did not sit down. He stood in the middle of the cafe, ignoring the small line of confused customers forming behind him, ignoring his driver's texts lighting up his phone. His eyes stayed fixed on Simone. "You knew," he said. "You knew, and you left without telling me." "I found out 2 days before I left," Simone said quietly, keeping her voice low so it wouldn't carry to the back room where Malachi was pretending to look for his backpack, listening to every word. "2 days, Dae-hyun. That's how much time I had before your cousin decided my life wasn't worth the trouble of explaining anything to you." His jaw tightened. "Jae-thung." "He didn't threaten me," she said. "Not directly. He's smarter than that. He showed me pictures of my little brother walking to class in Baltimore. He told me accidents happen to people far from home. And then he told me, you already had a second marriage arranged, that I was an inconvenience being managed." The room went silent around him. Customers pretended to check their phones. Simone reached under the counter and pulled out her own phone, scrolling until she found what she'd kept for 5 years, insurance she prayed she would never need to use. She turned the screen toward him. Photographs of Marcus. A screenshot of the message Jae-sung sent the night before she disappeared. Dae-hyun read it twice, then a third time, as if rereading it might change what it said. He knew that phrasing. He had heard Jae-sung use it before, in boardrooms, in negotiations, that same calm, surgical cruelty dressed up as concern. 6 years, Dae-hyun said, almost to himself. 6 years he sat across from me and watched me fall apart. 5, Simone corrected quietly. Malachi just turned 5. Something in Dae-hyun's face changed, a stillness settling over him that was far more dangerous than any shout. People who knew him understood this about Dae-hyun Cho. He didn't raise his voice when he was angry. He went quiet, and when he went quiet, people around him started making arrangements to be somewhere else. I have to go, he said. I'll be back tomorrow. You don't owe me that, Simone said. I know, he answered. I'm coming back anyway. He walked out without the coffee his driver had come in for. Behind him, Malachi peeked out from the back room, watching the tall stranger disappear down the street, already asking his mother the question she'd been dreading for 5 years. Mom, was that my dad? If this story already has your heart racing, that's exactly what good storytelling should do. Take 2 seconds right now, hit like on this video, and if you haven't already, subscribe, so this channel can keep bringing you stories like this one. Now back to Dae-hyun, who is about to walk into a boardroom and confront the one person he trusted more than anyone in his life. He didn't go to the jeweler. He didn't go home. He went straight to the Cho shipping headquarters near Busan's Namgu district, took the elevator to the 14th floor, and walked into Jae-sung's office without knocking. Jae-sung looked up from his desk, and in less than a second, something behind his eyes flickered, the look of a man watching a lie he'd buried finally claw its way back to the surface. Dae-hyun, you look like you've seen a ghost. I saw my son, Dae-hyun said. Jae-sung's expression didn't change, but his hands went still on the desk in front of him. 5 years. Dae-hyun continued, stepping closer. 5 years. You sat next to me, in every meeting, while I tore this company apart looking for her. 5 years you told me maybe she just didn't want to be found. You knew the entire time. I did what was necessary, Jae-sung said finally, his voice even rehearsed, like he'd been waiting for this conversation for years and had already decided exactly how he'd justify it. You were about to hand this family's reputation to a woman our partners in Tokyo and Shanghai would never respect. I protected this company. You threatened her brother. I made sure she understood the stakes, Jae-sung said, standing now, no longer hiding behind calm. You think I enjoyed doing that? I did it because someone in this family had to think clearly while you were busy falling in love with an American auditor who had no business anywhere near our operations. She's the mother of my son, Dae-hyun said, his voice dropping lower. Your family too, whether you wanted her to be or not. Jae-sung said nothing. His silence was its own confession. You're finished, Dae-hyun said. Effective today, you have no position in this company. Security will escort you out within the hour. You cannot run this operation without me, Jae-sung snapped, some of his composure finally cracking. I have run daily operations since your father died. I built half of what you're standing on right now. And I'm tearing it down, Dae-hyun said, starting with you. He turned and walked out, leaving his cousin standing alone in an office that would no longer be his by nightfall. Word traveled fast through the syndicate, the way it always does, and it reached Yoonji Baek within hours. She had agreed to marry Dae-hyun for the same reason most people in her world made decisions: business, alliance, image. She did not love him, but she had built her own quiet plans around becoming Mrs. Cho, and she was not about to let some American café owner and a 5-year-old undo them. Jae-sung, furious and freshly stripped of everything he'd spent 15 years building, made one final move on his way out the door. He called Yoon-ji directly and told her exactly where Dae-hyun had been spending his afternoons and exactly who the boy was. Yoon-ji didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply hung up the phone, opened her laptop, and began looking up which private school in Cheongdam-dong a mixed-race American boy named Malachi might be enrolled in. 3 days later, Malachi didn't come out of his after-school art class at the usual time. Simone waited outside the small studio near Apgujeong-ro, watching the door, checking her phone, telling herself he was just finishing a project, that there was nothing to worry about. 10 minutes became 20. 20 became 30. She walked inside and asked the instructor, who looked at her with confusion. "He left already," the instructor said. "A woman came for him. She said she was sent by his father." Simone's entire body went cold. She didn't call the police first. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called the only person she trusted to move faster than any officer in Seoul. Dae-hyun answered on the second ring. "Malachi is gone," she said, her voice breaking for the first time since he'd walked back into her life. "Someone told his class they were sent by you. Dae-hyun, someone took our son." If you have kids, or if you've ever loved someone enough to feel this kind of fear, you already understand exactly what Simone is feeling right now. Drop a comment below if this story has you holding your breath, and make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next is the moment this entire story has been building toward. Dae-hyun's voice changed instantly. The warmth that had been growing over the past few days, replaced by something colder, sharper, the version of him that had built and protected a criminal shipping empire for over a decade. "Stay where you are," he said. "I'm calling my head of security right now. I will find him." Within 40 minutes, tracing 3 shell companies and 1 very frightened driver who folded the moment Dae-hyun's men found him, they had a location. A private warehouse property near Incheon, registered under a name connected to Yoon-ji's family holdings. She had moved fast, and in her panic, she had moved carelessly. Dae-hyun brought 4 men, no more. This wasn't about a show of force. This was about precision. They entered quietly, no warning shots, no announcements, just controlled movement through a building that smelled of rust and cold concrete. In a back room, sitting on a stack of pallets with his knees pulled to his chest, Malachi looked up when the door opened. He wasn't crying, he was watching the doorway like he'd been waiting. Dae-hyun crossed the room in 4 steps and dropped to his knees in front of his son. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Malachi shook his head. Then, quietly, "I knew you'd come." Something moved through Dae-hyun's chest that he didn't have a name for. He pulled his son into his arms, and for the first time in 5 years, he held the one thing that made every ounce of power he'd built actually mean something. Getting out wasn't as clean. One of Yoon-ji's men caught Dae-hyun across the ribs before his own security subdued him. Dae-hyun didn't say a word about it. He simply carried his son out of that building, got him into the car, and only once Malachi was buckled safely into the back seat, wrapped in his own suit jacket, did Dae-hyun allow himself to wince. By the time they reached the hospital, 1 rib was confirmed cracked. Simone arrived 17 minutes later, running through the emergency room doors, and went straight to Malachi first, holding him so tightly he laughed and told her she was squeezing too hard. Then she looked up and saw Dae-hyun sitting on the edge of a hospital bed, ribs wrapped, jaw tight against the pain he'd been hiding for the last hour. "You didn't tell me you were hurt," she said. "Malachi was the priority," he answered simply. She stood there for a long moment, watching the man who had once been too afraid to protect their love out in the open, now sitting quietly bruised because he'd run into a building without hesitation to bring their son home. Something inside her, something she had held rigid and locked for 5 years, finally allowed itself to loosen. We are so close to the end of this story, and I promise you, What Dae-hyun says next in the hospital hallway is going to stay with you long after this video ends. If you want to see how this story wraps up, make sure that subscribe button is tapped, because I have more stories just like this one coming, and you won't want to miss them. Later that night, Simone found Dae-hyun standing alone by a window in the hospital corridor, looking out over the lights of the city. She stood beside him, and for a while, neither of them said anything. "Jae-sung is gone," he said finally. "Yoon-ji's family is facing a criminal investigation. The engagement is over." "I heard," Simone said. "I'm sorry," he said. "Not just for today. For 5 years ago, I loved you, and I still let the people around me treat you like a secret instead of protecting you the way you deserved. I should have made it impossible for anyone in my family to touch you." Simone was quiet for a moment. "I forgave you a long time ago," she said. "I had to. I couldn't raise your son carrying that much anger." She turned to face him fully. "But I need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman who left 5 years ago. I built something on my own. A business, a life, a son I raised without anyone's help. I don't need you to save me, Dae-hyun. I need someone who stands beside me, not in front of me." "I know," he said. "I'm not here to take credit for what you built without me. I'm here because Malachi deserves his father, and because I've been half a person since the morning I found out you were gone." She didn't answer that night. But she didn't walk away either. 6 weeks later, Simone opened the doors to her second cafe location in Itaewon, funded entirely with her own money, her own years of work, her own name on the lease. Floor-to-ceiling windows, the same smell of caramel and fresh bread that had built her first location from nothing. Dae-hyun arrived early, before the other guests, holding Malachi's hand. He walked up to the counter and placed a small box in front of her. "I did this wrong the first time," he said. "I loved you in secret and let my family make you feel small. I'm asking you now, in your own shop, in front of everything you built, on your terms, not mine." Malachi looked up at his mother with the seriousness only a 5-year-old fully invested in the moment can manage. "Mom," he said, "I think you should say yes." Simone looked at the ring. She looked at Dae-hyun. She looked at her son. And for the first time in 5 years, she smiled the real smile, the one she thought she'd lost, the night she packed one bag and disappeared into the dark. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me writing it, do me a favor and leave a comment letting me know what part hit you hardest. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that reminds you that the family you build can matter more than the family you were born into. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I'll see you in the next one.